All right, so it's up here. You good?
Yep.
Live. Okay, so I really want you to hear the definition of sacrament. Pastor Matt, I'm sure told you, but I'm going to remind you of it. A sacrament is a God act. So another way you could break that word sacrament into two words: sacred act, sacrament. Sacred acts. Something God is doing. That's really important. Okay? We call these things sacraments. Okay? Now in the Catholic Church there are 7 sacraments. And we've got our 2, communion, baptism. Then I always need my fingers for the other ones. We've got ordination of priests, marriage, last rites. You know what last rites are? When someone's about to die, the priest comes in and they bless them with a little saying, with a little phrase. And it's kind of the last thing they do before they die, right? So they're kind of forgiven right before they die. Confirmation, you guys are going to be doing that in some of you in a year, some of you in 2 years. And forgiveness of confession and forgiveness of sins. So often, especially in Catholic Church, you go in a little phone booth, and you talk to a priest on the other side of the phone booth, and you tell them the things you've done wrong, and they listen and they say, that's not so good. You really shouldn't do that. I forgive you, and in order to be forgiven, why don't you go and do a whole bunch of nice things, Or, that was really bad, you really messed up, you really need some big forgiveness here, and so now do a whole lot of stuff to, show that you're sorry. So, it's confession, you confess your sins, and the priest absolves you of your sins. Those are 7 sacraments. 7 sacraments in the Catholic Church. Lutheran Church, we said there are how many?
3. 7. 2. 3.
2. I know. Don't watch the fingers. 2. There's 2. And we said Holy Communion is 1. We said baptism is the other. Now, we said there's 3 things. So Luther came along and he said, you know what? The 7 things, the 7 sacraments in the Catholic Church are nice. They're all important and good. Marriage, ordination of priests, last rites. Those are all nice things. Confession and absolution. All those things are good and important. But he gave it a different definition. So this is where we get our 3 words. So as we said, we have command. So that Jesus in the Bible commands us to do these things. Does Jesus in the Bible command us to get married? No. Does Jesus in the Bible command us right before we die to have these special words said? No. Does Jesus command us all to go and be priests? No. But he does, in the Bible, command us to take communion. And the words that we have are, this comes out of these gospel texts, and the command is, take and eat, do this in remembrance of me. That's do this in remembrance of me, right? So it's not the great suggestion, right? This is a command. If I said to you, clean up your stuff before you leave, that's a command, isn't it? You will clean up your stuff before you leave. Did any of your parents say to you, before you get to do anything fun on your snow day, you have to clean your room? How many said that? I know I said it to my kids. You are not leaving the house until you clean up your room. I'm sick and tired of looking at your room. Right? This is a command. Jesus commands us to do it. So that's important. We're going to talk about the command in baptism. All right, that's next. Then there's a promise. Jesus, in the Bible, promises something to us. Jesus, in the Bible, promises something to us. So, here's the words of institution again. On the night in which he was betrayed, our Lord Jesus took bread. Can you find the promise in these words? Yeah. For the forgiveness of sin. Okay? As you do this, it will be for the forgiveness of sins. So the promise is that as you do this, you will receive forgiveness of sins. And that's essentially the promise that comes along with sacraments. Back here, I called it number 2. What do I call it? It's a means of grace. What is grace? God's forgiveness. God's riches in Christ's expense. But I said that's a simple word for Luther's explanation of forgiveness. It's a means of grace. You get what that means? You understand what that means? A means of grace is a way to receive forgiveness. So how do we receive forgiveness? We take communion and we're baptized. All right? Those are 2 ways we receive forgiveness. Okay? It's a means of grace. So that's the promise that comes in our for communion. We're going to talk in a little bit about baptism as well. For the forgiveness of sins. Then we said the earthly elements. Earthly elements are easy, right? We said bread and wine, right? And do you know what the word tangible means? What does tangible mean? Holy water. No. Don't keep guessing. You're way off. Don't keep guessing. Touchable. Thank you. Tangible is something that's touchable. You know what's really cool? And I taught you all this in 5th grade, but I'm sure you don't remember. What's really cool is you come up for communion. How many of you feel really bad about something? You said something really bad during the week. You feel really bad about it, and you know God's going to forgive you as you receive communion. And so as you come up, you receive your communion, you go back and sit down, and you say to yourself, I don't feel any different. How many of you ever feel that way? I know I do sometimes. You don't feel any different. And I say, I don't care. You know why? Did you eat it?
No.
Yes. Did you drink it? Yes. Could you touch it? It was tangible. You know you did that. God did the rest. God did the rest. God forgave you. God promises to forgive you. You might not feel different. You might still feel bad about this, and maybe you should still feel bad about it so you don't do it again. But the point is, the forgiveness is still yours. God has still forgiven you. And you know you did that. You know you ate it. You know you drank it. And that's the cool thing. In faith, there's so many things that just are not touchable. They're out there. Their feelings, their emotions, their prayers, their words, their thoughts, their reflections. There's so many things in our faith that are just out there. This is tangible. And I think that's why God gave it to us. Because it is so tangible that we walk away and go, I know I did that. Even if I still feel really bad, I still don't feel forgiven, I know God doesn't make mistakes. God promises to me that He will forgive me. And it's done. That's pretty cool, isn't it? And that's a really cool thing about something that's tangible. You can touch it. Now, I already talked about shrines, real presence. So, moving on. Let's get into baptism. I have one of my favorite videos I'm going to show you, and it's going to take up a whole bunch of time. But this is really cool. Like my game the other day that we did?
Yeah.
In my game, that was my favorite game. This is my favorite video.
Do we need to turn this off?
Yes. We realized that my confirmation session at the beginning of the year when I showed the Luther video, we're good. So, Luther said there's 3 definitions to define a sacrament, right? Command, promise, and earthly element. What's the earthly element for baptism? Water. Just regular water. Okay? So holy water is a Catholic term, which usually is water that's blessed. We believe that God uses just any water. We pull it right out of the tap. Okay? So it's nothing special, it's just regular water. Alright, but that's the tangible. You can feel it. The command, and this is on your final exam, your command that goes along with baptism comes out of the last words that are said to the disciples from Jesus as he is about to go up into heaven. He leaves them with the final phrase. He says, go and baptize. Go and baptize is the command. Go and baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Okay? So it's this command that we're supposed to go out throughout the whole world baptizing. The promise is about forgiveness of sins, but it comes from Mark 16:16. Out of the Bible, Jesus says, those who are baptized and believe will be saved. So we talk about salvation through the waters of baptism, and but what's interesting about that is if someone's baptized, does it really mean they're going to be a Christian? So I'll tell you a story. When you go to school to be a pastor, you go to a place called seminary. So I went to seminary, right? After your first year, they have a committee that comes and meets with you. They call it matriculation. It's a time where they want to make sure, okay, you've been here for a year. Should you really still be here? You know, they really want to know, do you really want to do this? Are you sure you want to be a pastor? Are you sure you want to do this? And so they talk with you, they ask you all sorts of questions. So one of the questions they asked me at that time together, they said, well, there was a story that happened recently that was in the newspaper. And it was about a baby that was baptized in the hospital. Now, what often happens is if there's any babies that are in a very serious situation, and the family is worried about them dying, they will call a pastor in and ask the pastor to baptize the baby. Okay? Because they want to make sure the baby's baptized in case it does die. I've probably done that 5-6 times in my 23 years. And what's kind of cool is almost all of them are still alive. And older than you, and one starred many times in the Tosis performances, and another's junior in college, and he's about 6'5". So, so I'm really excited that most of them lived and are doing really well. But they called me in to baptize. Now, the story that was in the paper was, what often sometimes happens is, when babies are in these situations, some nurses get a little excited, and they will, being worried about the baby, and maybe the family isn't coming in, they kind of do what Archie did, and they'll baptize the baby without anybody asking. And so the story went that this baby got baptized without anyone asking. And then right afterwards, they found out that the baby was actually Jewish. And so then the family found out that their baby was baptized, and the question became, the good Lutheran question that's in our small catechism, what does this mean? What does this mean? Does this mean our baby's now a Christian? What does this mean? And so when I was in that conference, they said to me, what would you tell that baby's parents? What would you say? And the answer I came up with was, well, baptism is a blessing, isn't it? It's really a blessing. You are receiving a blessing. So that blessing cannot really be taken back. That was one of the lines that was in the movie. Can you take back your baptism? Mike said, I renounced it. And Archie said, well, you can't renounce your belly button. It's the same thing. You can't renounce it. It's yours. It's your blessing. But the difference is, what do you do with it? That baby that was Jewish was not going to grow up in a Christian household, was not going to grow up as a Christian, was it? It would grow up as a Jewish baby. It would grow up as a Jewish child and adult. And so really, it's kind of that question of what do you do with it? And that's kind of where that question that comes up in Mark 16, there's two parts. Those who are baptized and believe. So the belief is an important part of that, isn't it? Now this is where a lot of churches disagree. Kind of like I said with baptism, with communion, how we understand communion gets taken lots of different ways. What is baptism? Is a big question that a lot of Christians ask. And so you have a lot of differences in that. That's why you have a Baptist denomination like the Baptist church that's up the street, right? They would say, well, baptism is a nice thing, but it's not necessary. And so I should say it this way. It's necessary, but only when you understand it. Only when you personally can stand up in front of a whole congregation and say, I believe this stuff. And since I believe this stuff, now I want to be baptized. Do we do that in our church? We don't, do we? We don't do that. When do we baptize normally? As babies. Can any baby stand up and go, I want to be baptized? Right? No, they can't. Do they understand it?
No.
Do they get it at all? Usually they're like, you're putting water on me, what are you doing? You know, they usually start crying when you do it. Now, you could say, well, the parents understand, they bring the baby through. Yeah, that's one argument. But we're saying the baby does not understand. Does not understand one bit. And what's really important about that point is the definition of the word sacrament. What was my definition of the word sacrament? Anybody remember?
A sacred act.
A sacred act or a
God act.
A God act. Something God is doing. Is it about what the baby is doing? We are putting the whole emphasis on, as Lutherans, on God. We are saying this is something God is doing. It's not so important about me. It's not so important about the parents. It's not so important about the pastor even. In fact, that was a big question that happened, and a lot of the theologians and the early theologians argued with this point. There was this one situation of a pastor who was really bad and did all these acts, baptismal acts, and baptized lots of people, and then they found out this person was a fraud and a bad person. They kicked him out. And everybody said, well, if he was such a bad person, maybe none of the things he did was from God. Maybe none of the things really took, weren't accurate. We need to get rebaptized. And they argued about that, and it came back to the point of what is a sacrament. It's a God act. It's not about the pastor, it's not about the baby, it's not about the parents. It's about what God is doing. You might feel exactly the same when you come back from your receiving communion. It doesn't matter. God took care of it. Right? That's the definition of a sacrament. And so, to say to that Jewish family, well, God did this, it's a special blessing, but how you will live it out is a whole different thing. Now, because we rest on the fact that it's a sacrament, some people say, well, then maybe we should do kind of what Edith talked about doing, the rain. Maybe we should stand out on the street corner with a hose, and as people walk by, spray them down. I baptize you, and they're like, what are you doing? Hey, you've been blessed. It's yours. They're like, thanks a lot, right? They're not going to be too happy. Now, here's another question. Can you ever be rebaptized?
Yes.
No. The answer is no. Because it's a sacrament. It's a God act. Did God make a mistake the first time?
Yeah. No.
No. God did not make a mistake the first time, and so you don't need to do it again. So what happens when you... Yes?
But don't some people get baptized into a new church?
So some churches would not recognize an infant being baptized. So the Baptist would say, you need to be of the right age, you need to be old enough, you need to understand what you're saying, and then you can be baptized. So they would say to them, you were baptized as a baby, you didn't understand any of that, so we're going to do it now. Now, I would say, it's done, but if you want to feel good about doing this, sure, do it again. Did God take care of it the first time? Definitely. In my understanding. But, hey, if you really need it, go ahead and do it. But we would say, as babies come in and are baptized, and as we baptize them in the hospital, often the family says, well, I want to do something in the church now. We would say, well, we're not going to baptize the baby, But we'll do the whole ceremony, all the same stuff. You know, we'll have the parents do a blessing, we'll say special prayers, we'll say, you're making a commitment here. You know, all these things. We'll ask the congregation to stand up and say some things. We'll all make promises and commitments to support this baby and teach them and raise them and send them through confirmation and all those good things. But when it comes to the words, we will not say the same words. We will say, I remember that you were baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We won't say, I baptize you in the name. So it's a little different words. We'll do all the same stuff, just so there's a public gathering for this. Now, we as Lutherans don't quite line up with, or aren't quite the same as Baptists, because they want you to be of the right age. But we think it is a good thing to stand up in front of everybody and say, hey, I believe this stuff. Okay? Guess when that happens? At confirmation. What you guys are doing. You're going through the process of thinking about this stuff, learning about it. At the very end of that process, in the second Sunday in November, usually, sometimes a little different, depending on the intros. Second Sunday of November, you will stand up when you're in 9th grade, and there will be a time where you affirm your baptism. That's what the confirmation, that's what we say, that's what that whole ceremony is. It's the affirmation of baptism service. So that's the time, just like the Baptists do, when you're old enough, you understand, you've been educated, you've gone through a bunch of stuff, where you stand up and say, I believe this stuff. I'm affirming what God did for me when I was a baby. And I'm continuing on this journey. Now, we're not saying you get it all. You understand it all. That you understand completely the definition of the word Trinity and what that all means. How can 3 be 1 and 1 be 3? I'm still wrestling with that in my head. That's not important. The important thing is you say, you're on the journey. You're on the faith journey where you're willing to keep asking the questions. Keep wrestling it. And I guarantee you, every answer you get, you'll get 5 more questions. Because that's God. God is so deep, so wide, so uncomprehensible. It's just so big that you keep asking more questions, and it's so great. You understand just how immense God is. So, baptism and communion are sacraments. They're God acts. Something God is doing for us. And both of them, the promise is what? The promise is what from Jesus? Forgiveness of sins. One of them we do once in our life that starts the journey. Another one is something where we are fed on the journey all the way through the rest of our lives. Okay? Fed for the journey. And you notice that we made a change here at St. Matthew's over this last year. We used to say, when you're in 5th grade, you'll start to receive communion. What do we say now?
When you're ready.
Whenever you're ready. Whenever you want to start to receive it. Now, we say if you haven't done it by 2nd grade, you should start taking communion. But we have 2-year-olds at St. Matthew's that are taking communion. I have, lots of little kids that are now receiving it. That's great. Because communion is a sacrament. Communion is a God act, a sacred act. Something God is doing. It's not about us. It's not if I understand it enough. It's not if I feel right that day. It's not if I've got something to be forgiven about or know of something I need to be forgiven about. It's nothing about us. It's about what God is doing for us. We put the emphasis on God. And so the age isn't important. So we made that change recently, and that's really important. Okay? All right. So the Archie Bunker thing. There's a lot of stuff in there, isn't there? You like that? That's one of my favorite ones. It's really subtle, but it's just all over the place. Archie has some really crazy understanding. But then Edith has got this deep faith, a sense of beauty to her and care. They both love Joey immensely, right? Archie wanted to do something really wonderful for him. He wanted wanted Joey to know about God, know that God loves him, know that as you're baptized, there's something that about an identity, right? Pastor Ed Winters used to say, when you're baptized, that's the first place on your forehead where God kisses you. I was like that, right? We always say when you're marked with the sign of the cross, you're marked. It's part of your identity. You're there it's there forever, all right? You might not acknowledge it, but it's there, right? Luther used to say whenever you get wet, and any time you bathe, make the sign of the cross on your forehead and remember what God did for you in baptism. Because, we'd say the food in communion is for the journey, right? It's like being fed. Water in baptism reminds us about what? Nolan, what does it remind us about? What does water do for us every day?
It cleanses us.
It cleanses us. Okay, so as we're bathed, we're cleansed. If you never take a shower, if you never bathe,
Like no one.
starts to become an issue, right? Starts to get a little stinky, and you need to be washed. You need to be cleansed, right? And that's what baptism does for us, to forgive us. What else do we use water for? Drinking. It gives us life, right? That's important. So these are great illustrations that remind us about the importance of baptism. So the whole Archie Bunker thing is really important. So Joey was baptized. He was baptized by Archie, right? Will that baptism take? We'll find out in 20 years, 30 years, Does he ever need to get baptized again? Not technically, right? We would say, well, good form, the proper way to do it would be to be in a church with the gathered community, where the whole church is making promises saying we're going to help this baby rise and raise and understand to know God. It's good to have a pastor do it because the pastor knows the proper way to do it, but in emergency situations, it's okay to have other people do it. Okay. All right, that was a lot of stuff. We only have a little bit of time for small groups, but I'm going to let you do that. So, next week is a fellowship night. Now, the point of the fellowship night next week is to be studying for your final exam. Your final exam is in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, you will have a final exam. And remember, I said that you need to get 5 or less answers wrong. If you get more than 5 answers, I'll give you another chance to take the final exam. It'll be the exact same final exam, but you'll have to retake it. And if you don't get that one right, you get another chance to retake it. And by the way, I'm happy to sit down with you if it works better, and we just go through the test together. And I'd be happy to do that with you. That sometimes helps people.
Could us do it?
What's that?
Could us do that?
What?
I mean, sit down together and...
Yes, be happy to do that with you. So that's helpful. Question? Say that again?
You have to name all the commands. If you get 5 of those wrong, it's not 5.
Every one of those is 1 point. So you need to know your commandments. Yeah. There may be like a little bit of extra credit. Sometimes I put like 1 or 2 half-point questions on there. That if you get them right, you get a little bit. Usually those are the harder questions. And then you get a little bit extra credit, which can maybe make up for one you got wrong. Emily?
In the study guide,
Yeah, in the study guide?
for like commandment things you have to say the number.
Yeah.
It says like Hermes and Mouse's replication 8 and 5, and then it comes to it says onion.
Okay, so onion was the idea that, remember how I talked about an onion, that the commandments are kind of like onions? So when you say you shall not kill, there's the literal translation of the outside of the onion, which is don't kill. Then the next layer in the onion would be don't hurt them. Don't kill them with words. Don't kill, you start to talk about all those ways that we talk about killing someone emotionally, those are the other layers of the onion that ignore the onions. That would be a nice way to do it. So, okay, does that help? So next week, if you want to come here and order pizza and study for your final exam as a group, that's great. If you want to go to someone's house and do that, that's great. But try to focus next week on studying for the final exam. And then the week after that is the final exam. Yeah. You have to do the whole thing again. So we will take the test, and then we'll sit together and actually grade the test that night. You will leave on the test night knowing exactly if you passed or not. And you will know which ones you messed up on. And I always say that I'm not a real stickler on spelling. So if you get it, if it's not perfectly spelled, I'm okay with it. And we can talk about answers if you're like, well, I really think this is kind of what you were saying. I'm like, yeah, it kind of is. So I'm pretty flexible. But there is a limit to that flexibility. There is a point where you break. So that's where you have to say, yeah, that really isn't the right answer. So, but I guarantee you, 7th graders that have never taken one of my tests, I guarantee you that if you study this study guide, you will pass my test. If you know this study guide, you will pass my test. Okay? All right? Yes, question. If you guys are really good, I'll have ice cream for you. You're really nice to us. You're really nice to your adults. Have you been really nice to your adults this year?
Oh, yeah.
Like so.
Every group that's really nice to their adults gets ice cream.
Alright, so the thing was like the verse, like John 3:16.
Yeah. You need to be pretty close. Every time we've said it a little differently, haven't we?
Yeah, like no one can ever remember.
If you get the general point, and you say it a little differently, you know there's different translations of the Bible, right?
Yeah.
So you can go to the Bible, and one of my favorite translations that sounds nothing like what you normally hear. Let me just pull up Matthew or John 3:16. I'm curious what it says. So John 3:16, it's called the Message translation. If you pull that up, John 3:16, using the Message translation, this is what it sounds like. That is not every document. Okay, this is the translation from John 3:16. This is how much God loved the world. He gave His Son, His one and only Son. And this is why, so that no one need be destroyed. By believing in Him, anyone can have a whole and lasting life. God didn't go to all the trouble of sending His Son merely to point an accusing finger, telling the world how bad it was. He came to help, to put the world right again. Anyone who trusts in Him is acquitted, forgiven. It's like an acquitted from a trial. Anyone who refuses to trust Him has long since been under the death sentence without knowing it. And why? Because of that person's failure to believe in the one-of-a-kind Son of God when introduced to Him. So that's a whole different translation, right? So, am I giving you some latitude? Yes. If you memorize that, sure. I'll give you a whole point extra credit if you memorize that. But realize that wasn't just one verse, that was 16 to 18. They lump it all together because he's getting the whole point of that whole section.
Yep.
So if you did that whole thing, I'll give you a point. Sure. All right. Good. Save your stuff. We have